Hello and welcome to WION Live broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett and we'll start with the headlines. Police arrest a suspect in the mass shooting that left 6 people dead at a US Independence Day parade in Illinois. NATO allies sign accession protocols for Sweden and Finland. Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid heads to France, where he's expected to press Emmanuel Macron, the French president, on Iranian nuclear negotiations and urge a tougher stance against Hezbollah from Lebanon. The euro sinks to its lowest level against the dollar since 2002 as data points to a growing recession risk in the eurozone. Italy declares a state of emergency for areas surrounding the River Po as it suffers from its worst drought for 70 years. Boris Johnson's Downing Street stands effectively accused of lying today by a former senior civil servant. It's the latest controversy to heap pressure on the British Prime Minister's leadership. Simon MacDonald, in a letter, says that Boris Johnson was told about an investigation involving former Deputy Chief Whip Chris Pincher back when he was the UK's Foreign Secretary. That would contradict Downing Street's insistence that the Prime Minister was not aware of any specific allegations against Chris Pincher when he appointed him Deputy Chief Whip. Last week, Pincher stepped down as the Tory Deputy Chief Whip following accusations of him groping 2 men at a club. He was later expelled from the Conservative Party. Chris Pincher faces 6 new claims of inappropriate behaviour stretching back over several years, all of which he denies. Our correspondent Sally Patterson joins me live from London now. Sally, what actually is the current government position on what Boris Johnson knew about allegations around Chris Pincher and when?
Well, Ollie, this government seems to really be sticking to its guns. Now, there are briefings going on as we speak, and there are also events going on in the House of Commons, so the situation could change over the next couple of hours. But for now, it seems that ministers are being told to stick with the line and not deviate. Now, this letter that we saw earlier on Tuesday morning from Lord MacDonald is really a very unusual move for a civil servant to come out of retirement and really write a very explosive public letter saying that Downing Street had made inaccurate claims. Now, in this letter, Lord MacDonald says that there was a formal complaint made about Chris Pincher way back several years ago, and the Prime Minister did know about it and was briefed in person about this complaint, which did actually carry through and ruled against Chris Pincher. This didn't go away. It wasn't resolved in that it disappeared. And so what we've seen is Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab has stuck by this claim that, you know, the Prime Minister certainly wasn't briefed. He says he wasn't briefed in person, and he did not know about this very specific complaint before Chris Pincher was given his new role as the Deputy Chief Whip.
Sally, thank you. That's Sally Patterson live from London. And staying with UK politics, Labour Party leader Keir Starmer says the UK would not be returning to the European Union if his party gets into government. Keir Starmer has unveiled the opposition's 5-point plan to make Brexit work. He says his party will move on from Brexit controversies and rows, saying that debate about rejoining the EU would be a recipe for further division and a distraction from the country's current challenges. Keir Starmer also attacked the Boris Johnson government over its economic policies, saying that the UK's economy has been stagnant under the Conservatives. He says the Brexit deal struck with the European Union is holding the country back. Labour's 5-point Make Brexit Work plan includes a commitment to sort out the Northern Ireland trade protocol, and Keir Starmer says he would remove trade barriers with the EU. Critics say he's short on detail about how he would exactly achieve those aims. Onto the war in Ukraine, where Kyiv's forces have returned to bunkered positions after officials said they were outnumbered by Russian troops who've taken the Lugansk region. With control of Lugansk now, Moscow's thought likely to shift its focus to Donetsk. The two areas make up the key industrial region of Ukraine of the Donbass. In Donetsk, Kramatorsk, dozens of residents, including elderly people, have lined up for hours to receive milk, bread and other groceries from NGOs. Russia has intensified attacks meanwhile on Kharkiv. 2 Russian missiles struck a residential area in the city. A school was badly damaged. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has again called for more economic aid to help his country rebuild.
Ukrainian forces liberated more than 1,000 settlements from the occupiers, and new ones are added every week. Now, for example, in the south of our country, all of them suffered large-scale destructions, and this also means the need for colossal funds for the restoration of infrastructure, for the return of medicine and social services, and for the restoration of normal economic life. There are tens of thousands of destroyed houses in the liberated areas.
Last week, Russia and Ukraine conducted the biggest prisoner exchange since the war broke out. Ukraine's troops have talked about a harrowing experience in Russian jails. Moscow says its troops were inhumanely treated when kept as prisoners of war.
Interviews with Russian servicemen have already established a number of such facts, namely prolonged beating with sticks and truncheons of bound prisoners of war, use of suffocation techniques, torture with electric current, leaving the wounded in need of medical care without water and food for 24 hours. Each of these accounts by returning servicemen is replete with examples of Ukrainian nationalists violating the Geneva Convention, which prohibits the harsh treatment and torture of prisoners of war. Russian investigators will make a legal assessment of each such case and identify those involved.
The chief suspect in the deadly Copenhagen Mall shooting has been remanded into a psychiatric care facility where he will now undergo evaluation. Authorities have ruled out any possible terror motive to the weekend shooting.
The man accused of killing 3 people in a shooting in a Danish shopping mall was ordered on Monday to be held in a closed psychiatric ward. The 22-year-old Danish male accused of opening fire on Sunday afternoon on shoppers in the Fields Mall, a few miles south of downtown Copenhagen, was arrested and charged with manslaughter and intent to kill. He was remanded into custody for 24 days and will undergo a psychiatric evaluation, according to authorities. Maximilian von Rentel was shopping at Fields Mall in Copenhagen when the man opened fire.
I was going to do some shopping and decided to go to Fields Mall. Luckily, I had just taken the later bus, and just when I was about to reach, I heard some shots, and people started running out of the mall. And at that moment, I realized that there was a shooting going on. So I turned around and started running as well, and tried to find the first place to hide.
In the video filmed by Rentelm, armed policemen boarded a bus and searched a man's bag before leaving. Authorities said they did not suspect the crime to be an act of terrorism, adding there was no indication the suspect had acted together with others. The court has barred publication of his name, which is common in criminal cases in Denmark. The incident rocked Denmark at the end of a week in which it hosted the first 3 stages of Tour de France cycle race. The attack took place when many young people had flocked to the mall ahead of a concert due to be held by British singer Harry Styles on Sunday evening, not far from the shopping centre. The concert was cancelled. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen called the shooting the worst possible nightmare.
Yesterday, here in the Fields building behind us, an unusually brutal attack on completely innocent people took place. Children, young, adults, families who were on their way to a concert, shopping, starting their summer holidays, enjoying a Sunday in our fantastic city. And in the space of a few minutes, what should have been a nice evening turned into the worst possible nightmare.
Police said the suspect was known to psychiatrists in Denmark. He was in possession of a rifle, ammunition and a knife when he was arrested. Danish gun laws are strict and all weapons, with the exception of some hunting rifles, require a license issued by the police. The police said the shooter did not have a license to use them.
As many as 50,000 people have been ordered to evacuate Australia's New South Wales. Torrential rains have continued to batter the country's east coast. The government's declared the floods a natural disaster as rivers rise above danger levels.
Torrential rains battered Australia's east coast on Tuesday, making a flood crisis in Sydney worse. Around 50,000 people across New South Wales, most in Sydney's west, were ordered to leave their homes after rivers swiftly rose past danger levels. New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet warned people to stay alert.
Wherever you are, please be careful when you're driving on our roads. Obviously, there is still substantial risk for flash flooding across our state.
The federal government declared the floods a natural disaster, helping flood-hit residents receive emergency funding support, and the risk of flooding could remain through the week. Among the most vulnerable in need of rescue are animals. On Tuesday, horses and cows swam with water up to their necks in search of higher ground in Sydney's outskirts. Farmer Wayne Zulrev said the water came up quickly, forcing farmers to act fast.
Obviously got to get them out now, so it's happened. Happened overnight and got to get them out.
The State Emergency Service joined in to help.
Yeah, it was really difficult with multiple animals in the water.
Emergency services boarded rafts, lassoing the animals and pulling them through floodwater to safety. Several places received more than Australia's annual average rainfall in 3 days.
India's Consumer Protection Authority has banned hotels and restaurants from levying a service charge on bills by default. It comes after complaints of restaurants charging extra without informing their customers that they were doing so. The new guidelines will bar restaurants from collecting tips under an alternate heading or deny service to customers for not paying the so-called service charge. In 2017, the Indian Consumer Affairs Department issued guidelines which said customers had only to pay prices displayed on the menu along with taxes and could use their discretion on whether or not to leave a tip. Some restaurants have continued to add a tip to the bill and left it up to patrons to contest the extra charge. Meanwhile, the National Restaurant Association is defending the practice and says it is a matter of individual policy. They say service charges bring additional revenue to the government since restaurants pay a tax on what they charge to customers. Rafael Nadal's bid for a third consecutive Grand Slam in 2022 is now very much on, with the second seed storming into the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. Nadal beat 21st seed Botic van de Zandschulp in straight sets to close out centre court action for Monday. The Spaniard had dropped just 7 games against the 27th seed Lorenzo Sonego in the previous round and faced the Dutchman for the second consecutive Grand Slam. The 6-4, 6-2, 7-6 win sets up a clash against the American 11th seed Taylor Fritz.
Looks very composed.
I think a big effort to be here. Takes a lot of mental and physical effort to try to play this tournament after the things that I went through the last couple of months. But as everybody knows, Wimbledon is a tournament that I like so much, and have been 3 years without playing here. So I really wanted to be back, and that's what I am doing. So that's why it means a lot for me to be in that quarterfinals now.
Meanwhile, Nick Kyrgios is risking a censure from the All England club after openly flouting Wimbledon's all-white clothing rule. The Australian was asked about his intentional rule breaking, and he said, "I do what I want." Wimbledon's all-white rule has been in place since the late 1800s. Many of tennis's greats have been ticked off for breaching those rules, which state that competitors must be clothed in suitable tennis attire and all clothing including wristbands and headbands must be white. Off-white and cream are also a no-no, and these rules are applicable the moment a player steps onto court. Wimbledon royalty Roger Federer and Venus Williams have previously been asked to adhere more closely to the strict dress code. Kyrgios has already fallen foul of the Wimbledon bosses after calling a line judge a snitch and then for an audible obscenity during an ill-tempered clash against Stefanos Tsitsipas on Saturday. On Monday, Kyrgios showed up on centre court wearing red sneakers. His 3-hour slugfest against Brandon Nakashima sent him through to a first quarterfinal since 2014. He then promptly changed back into his favourite Air Jordans and sported a red cap for the on-court interview before some testy off-court exchanges with journalists.
It's interesting your comments earlier about the controversy that just seems to materialise around you. We all know the Wimbledon dress code rules are very strict. Competitors must be dressed in suitable tennis attire that's almost entirely white, and this applies from the point at which the player enters the courts around.
Yep.
Why then would you walk onto centre court with bright red trainers on and do an interview in a red cap?
Because I do what I want.
So you're above the rules?
No, I'm not above the rules.
So what is it? They don't apply to you?
I just like wearing my Jordans.
But there are rules specifically against that. The referee, I don't want to spoil the surprise, but the referees are going to be speaking to you about it.
That's okay.
Afterwards, and that's okay.
I'll wear some triple whites tomorrow.
But that's fine then. So everyone else in both draws follows.
But no one else, even after Wimbledon, like no one else really walks with Jordans on the court.
Okay, Matt, sorry, we're going to...
But sorry, I'm just sorry to say, Nick's just moaned about the controversy that surrounds him.
I haven't moaned. I love it.
Well, you've laughed it off, so that's all part of it, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's more attention for me. What's that saying? Any publicity is good publicity, right?
If you say so.
Keep doing you then, champion.
One London-based artist has taken up an unusual tool, the typewriter. It's now key to James Cook's art.
Since 2014, the last 8 years, I've just been slowly learning how to make drawings, but it never gets any easier. It's always a challenge. I couldn't draw people's faces before doing typewriter art. In fact, I probably draw people better on a typewriter than I can draw freehand in sort of pen or pencil, just because I've done so many portraits. Depending on what you're typing, you'll use specific keys and you'll puzzle piece them together to make the drawing to represent the subject. So if it's a portrait of, someone's face, for example, you'll use for the pupils of the eyes, you want to recreate that sort of curvature of their eyes. So I'll use like a bracket symbol. Whereas if it's the shading that you're trying to recreate someone's skin complexion, I will use the @ symbol because it has quite a large surface area, and you can do blending with larger symbols. There's something really satisfying about kind of using this sort of limited palette of. You basically have about 44 keys on a typewriter on average, and so you've got to kind of puzzle piece those letters, numbers, punctuation marks together to make a drawing. You see why I can't do this from home. It's so noisy, everyone else gets sick of hearing it. I've only ever had to buy 3 typewriters, and the rest are what people have seen the work online or in newspapers or somewhere else. I normally get an email out of the blue, someone saying, we've got this typewriter, we've had it in our family for such a long time. We don't know what to do with it, we don't know how to use it, and we know that if we give it to you, you can give it a second life. Like how musicians play musical instruments, you kind of develop a muscle memory for like the weighting of the keys and sort of the placement of the switches and levers, and that helps you to be very precise about the marks that you make on the page. So going from a typewriter that you're familiar with to suddenly getting a new typewriter and it's all completely out, it's like it's probably the equivalent of like getting into someone else's car and the seat's been pulled all the way back or all the way forward. You're sort of out of sync with everything. When available, I'll try and work outside as much as I can. So places like this, because they're just on my doorstep, I like to take with me a portable typewriter, something that's lightweight with a carry case, and I will actually go and sit on location and do drawings. People are kind of confused to begin with because they think I'm writing a letter, but then they sort of draw closer, and normally a conversation kind of sparks from people seeing the drawings.
For him to be able to turn it into a work of art for painting and drawings, I think is just amazing. So it's fascinating what he does, and it's nice to see that the old is not dead yet.
So drawing like this, for example, anything that's A4 in size can take anywhere between 4 to 5 days. Yeah, so such as Big Ben, you've got the big clock faces, so something curved. So again, I've definitely used bracket symbols in this drawing. All of like the turrets and the windows normally have a pitch to them, and at that scale you can use a capital A to get the pointy roofs.
And we'll just end with an update to the story that we started with, those controversies swirling around the government related to the former Deputy Chief Whip Chris Pincher here in the UK. As we were hearing from our reporter Sally Patterson, the position from the government this morning, set out by the Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab, was that Boris Johnson was not briefed 3 years ago about allegations of misconduct that were directed towards Chris Pincher. Well, that position through the course of the bulletin has changed. We have since had the Paymaster General Michael Ellis speaking in the House of Commons. He now admits that Boris Johnson was briefed about that allegation of misconduct several years ago. He essentially appears to be saying that Boris Johnson had forgotten that he received that briefing. Lots of questions remain about how Boris Johnson's Downing Street has handled this latest controversy. All sorts of speculation now swirling again at Westminster about whether MPs might be able to try and remove Boris Johnson as their leader. The most likely way for that to happen, it appears, at the moment, is for cabinet ministers to resign and try and make Boris Johnson's position as leader of their party untenable. No sign of that yet, but we'll be keeping a close eye on it for you here at WION. Do stay tuned to WION. See you tomorrow at the same time.
There are many other... this is right, Arab.